So what exactly are we going to make? Welcome to Arts and Crafts at the Tab House. By arts and crafts, I mean we're going to be making an extractor ventilator fan for this Thetford toilet. Now there is a company out there that makes this product, but I think it's UK or Australian based. So it's pretty tough to get here in the States. Plus, I feel like the design is slightly overly complex. And I feel like I can do this a little more simplified and utilize what is already there. But we'll see if it works. Alright, first things first. I need to get a couple parts, but first I have to make a commitment cut here. Now this whole job's going to be a little tough to film because of the tight quarters here. So I'm going to do my best on showing you how I'm going to do this, but first thing we got to do is pull up this little pocket here where our vent is. And that just pulls up like this. And inside, you can see that there's a vent hose. And I'm going to slice that thing in half. Okay, so I just used a pair of scissors and I cut the vent pipe in half. I want to leave a little in there on purpose just in case I need it. Now this one in the tab is kind of goopered and glued on from underneath, so it isn't going anywhere. And I need to unscrew this piece because I need to take this with me to the hardware store so I can get some sizes on some parts that I may need to do this. Alright, before we run out and get a couple parts here, I want to kind of explain what I'm about to do. So here's our top to our vent tube for our cassette toilet. And the cassette toilet meets up with that part and it opens its little pressure vent. And that tube runs out the bottom of the trailer. On a Tab 320, we're lucky enough that we have this running out the bottom of the trailer because I think that's going to make this job a lot easier. But what I need to do is run to the parts store and find a reducer that fits just inside of this, which I think this is either 2 inch or 1.5 inch inside, I'm not sure. And I want a reducer to fit over this, shrink down just enough to go inside the part going outside of the trailer, because I want this little 40 mil fan to sit inside of that cup. And that way we have a whole closed ventilation system here. Then I'm going to run some wiring up to the top near the toilet, and I found this little tiny push button 12mm switch on Amazon, and I'm hoping this all works out right. I'm no electrician here, so we're going to bench test this before we even do anything, but I did pick up these little tiny Wago connectors that work great for this wire size, which are good for quick connects, and in this situation we probably won't have any water really in the area. If not, I can always make changes and we'll solder our wires up and heat shrink them. I will also have to make an inline fuse. Now this thing doesn't pull more than I think a little over 0.5 amp of power. They're 2 amp fuses. I couldn't find a 1 amp, so I'm going to have to change that later on. Besides, locally here I can never find what I need, and we'll have to be making a small fuse holder in that tight closed quarter area. But we're going to tap into power with these T-taps, which I don't really like, but I think that's our only option to do this, and I think it'll work fine. I also picked up some carbon air filter that I can cut to shape. So I don't know if I can put one right over this, or I'm going to cap it, or I'm going to put it on the bottom, but that should take our smell and kind of filter it out when this little guy vents. Now, why am I going through this? Well, even though the Matt's liquefied chemical works extremely well, when that gets stirred up, when this trailer moves, that smell comes up through that toilet no matter what. And the reason being is this trailer, like most trailers, especially this one, is sealed incredibly well. So the negative pressure in here is drawing everything out of that vent tube up through the toilet as this trailer goes down the road shaking and kind of like puffing air in and out. So I want to get rid of that smell, and that's why I want to put that on a switch so I can run this fan for as long as I like, the whole time I'm at camp, or just right when I'm going to flush, or when I'm going down the road, it can vent, and that way it pulls a little bit of positive pressure back through that toilet and cancels out anything coming back up. Okay, just got back from the home improvement store, and here's what I came up with to mount this fan so far. And this might not even be a permanent solution yet, but I found this 2-inch to 1.5-inch rubber reducer and some of this ducting or air conditioner foam, and I just shoved it in around there and packed this fan in to seal around it. This lid from the cassette is going to come down in here like that. Now, it won't be a perfect seal, but that's not going to matter. We'll get to that later. But the fan will be right there. Alright, so this thing works out just perfectly to fit right inside the vent tube here, even with the wire passing through. And if you cut this vent tube higher up, it'll give you some extra to set this down in here at the right level. And that top piece is going to come in and sit right on top of that. But I think that's going to do the job. But before we go tapping into anything here like wiring, we're going to make sure this whole system works. Just like the famous Dr. Emmett L. Brown used to say, you're going to have to excuse me for the crudity of this model. This is all I could do in short notice. I just want to make sure my system works here. But we have our switch. Nice little LED switch, on and off. That's going to go on the top side near the toilet. I have all my wiring pre-cut to length, and these are kind of temporary connectors right now. Those will have to be soldered, but these Wago connectors are really cool because you can kind of preset things up if you don't want it permanent, just to see if everything works. But it is working, and our fan is spinning. It's almost impossible to hear this fan. It is pulling some air. I could feel it coming through my hand here. I don't know if that's going to be enough draw, but that's exactly why I designed this first, in case I need to up the size to a bigger fan. At least I have my whole system in place. So now I'm going to get on to the next step here and solder these very tiny connectors to my wire and drill some holes and mount this through everything, and I'll bring everybody back. Alright, back inside here, I want to show you guys what's under your switch control panel here. I just got my fan button mounted up in my switch control panel, and it looks pretty slick. But I'll show you what's under here in case you were ever wondering. I did skip a lot on this video because I really needed two hands, and filming doing a lot of this was kind of a pain. So I'm just going to kind of show you and go over everything here. So your switch panel goes right here. Nothing too complex. Your toilet handle mounts on this thing. So if you ever need to take it off, you just gently pry up on it, pop that out of the way, gently pry up on your panel, and you have a circuit board under there. You don't want to ever get wet. 2 pins on each side, lift it straight up very carefully. Under that, you're going to have your wires coming in to your circuit board for your flusher, and a relay here to allow the water to open up to come in when you flush. So what I ended up doing here is, since this toilet is compatible with many different versions, it has a big gaping hole down in here, and you can just see the outside where I ran my wires. There's another version of this where it has a little filler spout, and the inside of this toilet is actually a whole holding tank, and it would have a separate electric pump just for that little toilet tank if you don't have water hooked up from your RV. But it made it nice to be able to run my wires straight outside that way. They ran them straight down the toilet flusher lever area, and that was a little too congested for me to run wires through, so I did it this way. So I have my Wago connectors here, and I know some people hate these things, but I'm not 100% sure if this is going to be a permanent thing or not. And if not, I'm not too worried about them. They work pretty good. They use them all over the trailer anyway, and I don't really think it's going to get wet under here. back to our switchboard here. If you ever have to take this off for some reason, I'm going to show you how. Right on the top edge of each one of these plugs is a tab. You need to gently lift up while you pull this guy right here and this little guy right here out of that. And then you can pull this thing out. So why I got such a small switch or button here was so it would fit perfectly in this piece. Now you could come up straight through the hole under here, but it might be kind of tough to get your fingers on the inside. So you can tighten down this little nut right here. Now the switch has a little rubber gasket in between it, so it should be pretty waterproof. It is technically a marine type switch, so you should be fine. We'll find out in time if I fry this circuit board here, but I put it in this location on purpose because it comes through in just the right spot here and on the top side. And if this little button is too small or annoying, which I can get my finger in there and click that on and off, no problem. But if that is too annoying, I can still size up to a 16 millimeter from this 12 millimeter round switch. So 16 millimeter switch, this outer ring would be about the size of this blue circle here. Alright, now to plug everything back in, and I'll show you guys what I did underneath here, and we're going to find out if this thing works. Okay, let me show you what I did here. So, our wiring for power taps in right here. And I don't really like the T-taps, but this was the easiest way to bring power into this switch and this fan in this area. There is a fuse here for the toilet. But as usual, I couldn't get the right parts and the right things I needed and should have ordered it online when I did. So I had to make myself a little ghetto fabulous fuse holder. And what I did was I used pretty much two smaller versions of these next to each other. Then I put some heat shrink over and just stuck my little 2 amp fuse in there for now. To tell you the truth, I could probably shrink that down to 1 amp if I can find one. And that's what I'll probably end up doing, or putting a small inline old style glass fuse. I use some of these sticky sided zip tie holders to hold the wiring up out of the way here so the cassette toilet doesn't hit anything. And this is that hole I was telling you about, leads right inside. And that goes right up to your control switch. And if you had the standalone version of this, you'd have a spout here, and that's where you fill up your water and toilet treatment if it had its own separate pump. But here in the tab, we get our water directly from the water pump in the trailer. So to get wiring to the fan from the switch, I ran it in line down here using these holders for zip ties that stick on. And it should be just tucked out of the way that my cassette doesn't hit it. If not, we may have to try to route it down in this groove somehow. Or maybe just use some hot glue or something. But that runs all the way back. There was a little hole way back there that looked like a punch out. So what I did was I drilled a tiny little hole through the inside of this box and fished my wires up through there. But you take your cover off here, and now you can see the fan setup. So that hose clamp is just there to kind of hold that fan in that little round thing a little tighter. You don't even need it, but... And I have some extra wire tucked in here. That way when I have to change this fan out, I can get it out of there. Since it's tucked so far back up in here, but... I think that's going to work for now. This isn't my final rendition yet, and there is a huge problem with that fan. It obviously works like advertised, and I can't hear it. Okay, so anyways, as you can see, that's got a little port or whatever, and that just kind of mates up right with that, right to the fan. It doesn't need to be super sealed yet, but I'll tell you what, I can feel it drawing air right over my hand. And what I may do later on is come in and just clear tape the edge if it isn't sealed enough, and that should create a vacuum in that box itself. But here's the moment of truth. And before we put this thing in here, I did tape the valve area on the cassette, because that could suck a little air through here too, as well as it's coming up and through and past. But we should have just the right amount of clearance right there on those wires. All right, and it fits on in. Now to do the toilet smoke test here, see if it's drawing any pressure in. All right, back on the inside. I think that came out pretty factory looking. Maybe not the greatest job in the world, but I think that looks pretty good, especially with this little switch. It fits in there perfect, man. That is awesome. Now, if I'm really quiet, I can hear that fan now. Just barely. And that is another reason why I picked such a small button, because if I wanted it right here, it clears the toilet handle. Just barely. Pretty cool. Here comes the dangerous test. We're gonna light the end on this on fire because I couldn't find an incense around here. And we're gonna see if it draws. It's just barely drawn in. That might be all we need, but I honestly think I'm going to upgrade that fan to something with a little bit more power. But look at that. It's pulling that smoke right down through, so that may be enough. I don't think it's going to be enough to counteract the max fan inside the trailer, but that's pretty good. That's pretty cool. Well, that was a pretty fun little project. I've been wanting to do that for quite some time now. I'm sorry I didn't do a whole full breakdown on how to do everything and how to wire. I'm not an electrician or wiring expert here, so don't take my word for anything, of course. But I'm going to see how this thing works for a little while, and then I'll do a full breakdown on what's needed to do that if anybody's interested in doing that. There are a few other videos out there of others that have kind of made a DIY version of this Thetford extractor fan. There is a company out there called SOG that sells a kit, but you have to drill into your cap on your cassette or in the top and run a vent pipe out, and it just sits on a micro switch. When you open your toilet, it turns on and it shuts off. But like most things, that exists in the UK or Australia, and I haven't found where to get it here in the United States. Besides that, I wanted mine on an actual switch. That way I can leave it on so it's constantly pulling any kind of smell out of that pipe and not allowing it to come up and out. You know, and these little tabs are sealed so well. When you have that vent fan on, I mean, it creates a whole negative pressure in this trailer, and it pulls from wherever it can get air. And hopefully that's enough to kind of at least neutralize the negative pressure in the trailer. But tell you the truth, I mean, that is a really good fan, but I think I may try to find a little louder fan, believe it or not, because I can barely hear it running. And on top of that, I may double stack that and change that design a little bit to pull a little more pressure out through that cassette toilet. So it's not really a finalized design yet. I'd say all in all, total materials used with the fan, wiring, that little switch button, some connectors, that rubber adapter I used for plumbing, that's 1.5 inch to a 2-inch top, and it fit in that vent pipe perfect down below. So for everything used, I may be into that little project, I don't know, $40 total. I mean, I did buy a whole bunch of extra wire and connectors and all that kind of stuff, which I'll use later on for many other projects. So as a bulk buy, all that probably was, I don't know, $70 total. Now that SOG extractor fan kit, or the one I think maybe Thetford sells, if that's Thetford's or SOG's, I'm not sure, that thing runs about 300 plus bucks. So we'll see how that little project hangs. If I switch the fan out, I'll let you guys know, see how it does then. And then once it's all finalized, I'll give everybody a parts breakdown, and then you can go out and make this thing yourself if it works that well. My whole goal was simplicity, and I always like to make things look factory, of course. And that little button being in that location, it looks pretty factory to me. Looks pretty good. And it's nice and bright when it's turned on the way I have it wired. The light comes on when the fan's on, and it goes off when the fan is off. Alright, well, I think I have one more project to do, and that's fixing this strange front bearing sound on the truck. I'll probably do that next week. Following week is going to be Christmas, and then the week after I'll probably get out and about. I was planning on taking off next weekend, but with the truck and that little bit of bearing sound, I don't want to risk it if I don't have to, so I'm going to try to get that fixed first. And who knows, maybe I'll just do an overnighter out here in the desert with a tab if everything goes all right with the truck. If you have any questions about this, go ahead and leave it in the comment section. I don't mind answering any questions. Or maybe you have some proven helpful info when it comes to electrical wiring that I should know. Well, we'll see you guys in a week.